Yeah. Yeah. 1, 2, 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. Hey, hey, hey.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to all our G20 colleagues. Welcome to all our South African colleagues. Welcome to all our University of Free State colleagues, and I'm hoping I'm welcoming some of our Bloemfontein residents and citizens. And of course, welcome to those who are joining us online at this Research and Innovation Working Group of the G20 side event. We are here today to talk about shaping a brighter future for women and girls in science. Now, the South African presidency aims through its work over this year to advocate for gender-responsive science, technology, engineering and mathematics program, and later today we've heard of a STEAM where we include arts, and later today we're also going to hear about a second M where we include manufacturing. So to do that, we are trying to push for increased funding for women-led research and innovation, to facilitate international collaboration, particularly to share best practice to bridge the gender gap, and to integrate the interests of the unique challenges and contexts of the G20 countries in relation to women in STEM careers. So for this specific event today, we are drawing on our South African and African experience very much. And we want to highlight the challenges and systemic barriers, but we want to also share a conception of diversity as a driver of innovation. Very importantly, we want to bring best practices and the idea of developing actionable strategies. And we do this by celebrating achievements, and most importantly, before we hopefully and after and over the last few days, we've been creating an opportunity for networking and mentorship, and we hope that after this event we will have more opportunities for that. So in thinking of this event, I thought it was fitting that it is shortly after the UNESCO Women and Girls in Science event annual day. And we have the International Women's Day coming up in March. So the UNESCO has put a stress on leadership, women leadership in STEM. And the International Women's Day has a very simple but very powerful theme that I think we need to put at the back and underlying everything we discuss and do today. And that is accelerate action, which links to our idea of putting forward actionable strategies. So our program, hopefully you had a chance to download it from the QR code that we had up earlier. Our program has 3 parts. The first one is very short, and that will be a welcome from our core partners in organizing this event. The second part, we will have 2 scene-setting keynote addresses. One that's setting out the state of the current trends in women in STEM, and the other that is really directly addressing how we accelerate action for growing women's STEM capabilities. And then the third and largest part of our program is a panel discussion. What does it take to shape a better future where women and girls can thrive in STEM careers? And again, this will be the opportunity for us to think how we accelerate action. So let us move to the first session. I am going to introduce all 3 speakers at once. First, we have Imran Patel, Deputy Director General in the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation, South Africa. Second, we have the Chief Executive Officer of the Human Sciences Research Council. And third, you've all met Dr. Ezra Clark, who is the Chief of STI Policy in the National Sciences sector of UNESCO. So each of those have a chance to share some welcoming words and to put some questions and issues on the agenda to help stimulate our thinking and our discussion. So thank you. Over to you, Imran, Sarah, Ezra, in that order.
Thank you. Thanks, Glenda, and good afternoon to all of the participants. Glenda did say that we're part of the shorter section because the real content discussion precedes this. But let me start by welcoming one and all. We've welcomed the G20 delegates we've been with for the last 2 days. But thanks for traveling far and wide and making yourself available for this session. But also welcome to our local participants and people who've traveled specifically for this workshop. I mean, we do look forward to this. I bring you greetings in the name of our Minister and Deputy Minister who were both not able to join this important session. But I can say with confidence, and I have some of my colleagues here, that the issue of diversity, inclusion, especially inclusion in a whole range of dimensions, is a key theme that continuously gets stressed. As part of that inclusion agenda, the whole issue of women in science is of great significance. Now, in terms of just some of the kind of areas, and I look forward to, I want to just build on the comment, Glenda, that you made around accelerated action. I think that is clearly something that we require. We've had many discussions. The challenges are well known, even though there are some debates now about the value of diversity and inclusion. But our own experience have shown that you can't build the kind of society that we require on the backs of a few. The challenges that we have requires the efforts of all. It requires diverse views, diverse orientations and understandings of the way that we're wanting to do. So the challenges that we face are not going to be solved if we don't deal with the issues of diversity and inclusion. Can I just move this? So the problem statement is well defined. I think we have encountered challenges in the progress that we've achieved over time. And part of that achieving progress moving forward requires us to be a lot more targeted and focused in particular areas. In the South African instance, as an example, we've been looking, as part of my portfolio, we've been looking at the data and the numbers, and it's clear that there are particular areas that require accelerated action. The engineering, the computer science areas, etc., are kind of significant areas, and it's not just, we've seen some research work that kind of narrows it down to simple single factors like interest in these areas. There are a range of factors. These are multidimensional challenges. So what we need to be able to do to take things forward, and I want to kind of hear what some of the presenters who are knowledgeable, who have a deep understanding of the reality, is to understand where is it that we target our specific action. Because we're not able to do things across the board. Resources are always a problem, but also the ability of the system to change is a problem. So that's part one. We need to be much more targeted in terms of the areas that we need to focus on, set smaller achievable goals, and drive that. The second is we need to adopt a much more systems approach to these challenges that we have. I was glad in the number of discussions that we are looking at that. I was looking at the program, and the range of speakers cover the multiple dimensions that needs a response to be able to shift the needle in terms of the representation of women and girls in science. These include deep-seated challenges like workplace culture, the nature of the industry, the nature of the challenge, and other kind of factors, funding, support, mentoring, etc. We think in South Africa we have a number of useful instruments that we've put in place. Part of our challenge is, from a policy perspective, is to bring that together into a much more coherent policy mix in order to accelerate action. So a policy mix approach, I think, would be able to get there in terms of where we're wanting to go to. And then I want to just conclude my brief remarks by highlighting that I was looking at the theme, and it said, shaping a brighter future for women and girls in science. And I think we need to change that to say it's, women and girls in science is shaping a brighter future for all of us, in a sense. So this notion that that there's a different science, there's one science system, the kind of challenges that we face requires everyone to be on board. So it's not, in some instances, it's not charity, it's not something that we have to do reluctantly. We need to do it in a kind of a purposeful way. So I look forward to the discussions, and I think I speak on behalf of the DSI. We welcome opportunities like this nowadays, not just simply to have another dialogue, but to take careful notes of the kind of action items that emerge. Some of them sometimes just give more money, which might be difficult, but those we will even address. But more importantly, if there are changes that we need to be taking at the governmental level to create a more enabling environment for things to be accelerated, then that's something we would do. So we look forward to this process running its course. And then from the HSRC and the UNESCO colleagues, congratulations on pulling this together at short notice, I'm told. And then look forward to you coming back to us with a sense of what it is that we can do to accelerate action. So I look forward to the conversations and discussions, and wish everyone well. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's not in my notes, but I thought that would be not proper for me to acknowledge the fantastic HSRC team. I'm always proud to work with such an amazing team, going beyond the call of duty. This was indeed, Imran, short notice, but the HSRC team always is available for national duty. My name is indeed Sarah Moswetsa. I'm the CEO at HSRC. I'm also the interim chair of the South African BRICS think tank. It is both a privilege and an honor to welcome all of you here. Particularly, I am glad, honored that we've been able to work with our valued partner, UNESCO, to this very vital, timely, I think, side event. We are also at the University of Free State. The University of Free State students have really honored us. And for some of you who are South Africans, you'll know what I'm talking about. We are gathered here to talk about the persistent and underrepresentation of women in STEM, but I also want to highlight in leadership, in peace building, and innovation fields. This event coincides for us as South Africans with an untimely passing of Senamile Masango, South Africa's first Black nuclear scientist. At just 37 years old, she was a trailblazer, an inspiration, a role model for countless young women across our country. Many South Africans thought of her as the queen of science, a woman who broke barriers, defied expectations, and paved the way for future generations. Her passing is a profound loss, but her legacy serves as a reminder of what is possible when women are given opportunity to lead, particularly in STEM, particularly in innovation fields. Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, with underlined, bold, italics, in italics, with STEM, with HSS, the humanities and social sciences, are the engines of economies and the well-being of our people. Yet, despite the decades of advocacy, policy interventions, and growing awareness, women remain significantly underrepresented in these fields. This is not just a loss for women, it is a loss for science, for innovation, and for humanity as a whole. As we imagine this issue today, as we examine it, and I'm looking forward to learning from our keynote addresses, and I've met one amazing person who's an engineer, and for you who know some of my utterances, jokes about engineers, today I met a very progressive one. We must acknowledge that gender inequality does not exist in isolation. The triple challenge of race, of gender, of class continues to shape access to opportunities the world over. Women from historically marginalized racial and socioeconomic backgrounds face even greater structural barriers in STEM. Barriers are often invisible. These barriers are often invisible, but deeply entrenched, whether through unequal access to quality education, systemic biases in hiring and promotion, or limited representation in leadership roles. These intersecting inequalities demand, I agree, accelerated action by all of us. We must understand this as a structural inequality, the ways in which social systems, and Imran spoke of this, social systems, institutions, policies create and maintain disparities. For me, we must act decisively to end this, be it from targeted funding to gender and race responsive institutional reform, to global mentorship, and this is why we're partnering with UNESCO, global mentorship and leadership networks. As I conclude, South Africa's G20 presidency provides us with a unique opportunity to move from dialogue to action, accelerated action. Let us use this platform for me and for all of us to forge partnerships, and we've started already, to influence policy and create a legacy of transformation. As we honor Sinamile, her remarkable contribution, let us commit, for me, to ensuring that the path she paved remains open for many more to follow. May her life's work inspire us to redouble our efforts, not only to celebrate the achievements of women in STEM, but to actively create the conditions for their success. I look forward to the insights that will emerge from our conversations today and after today, and more importantly, to concretize, to a specific and concretize our accelerated actions beyond this room. I know that together we can build a future where gender equality in STEM innovation with HSS is not just an aspiration, but a reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, G20 members, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honour today to join you on behalf of UNESCO for this important event focusing on celebrating and advancing the role of women and girls in science. So my sincere thanks to the Government of South Africa, the Human Sciences Research Council, and all the partners for bringing us together to discuss concrete ways to accelerate gender equality in STEM. Science in the 21st century, at its best, is dynamic, collaborative, and diverse. We all know it's a powerful tool for solving global challenges, from climate change to public health and technological innovation. But for science to reach its full potential, it must be inclusive. And this is why the International Decade for Sciences for Sustainable Development, which runs from 2024 up to 2033, calls for strengthened global cooperation in science and, importantly, has gender equality as a central pillar. Yet, despite some progress, women still represent around only a third of the global scientific community, and this figure doesn't seem to be budging much. In some countries, fewer than 10% of researchers are women, and in G20 nations, only around 22% of STEM jobs are held by women. So we can see much progress needed. And these figures are more than just a matter of fairness. They also represent a vast untapped potential for innovation and for excellence. So aligned with its two global priorities of Africa and gender equality, UNESCO is committed to addressing this disparity. And a year ago, we launched the Call to Action, Closing the Gender Gap in Science, a global initiative to mobilise multi-stakeholder action. And hopefully on your way in you picked up a copy of the Call to Action, and if they're all gone, I apologise, but it's available on our website. You can download a copy from there. And as I said, it's a global initiative to mobilise multi-stakeholder action. And since the launch, it's reached thousands of individuals and organisations, fostering collaboration and sharing good practices worldwide. And those G20 members will recall that this was also recommended in the G20 recommendations on diversity, equity, inclusion and accessibility in science, technology, innovation from this working group, from the Research Innovation Working Group. And as was just mentioned in the introduction, 2 weeks ago on the 11th of February, UNESCO hosted an event entitled Unpacking STEM Careers, Her Voice in Science, at our headquarters in Paris to mark the 10th anniversary of International Day for Women and Girls in Science. And we had over 1,800 participants joining in person at headquarters and online. And the discussions there really emphasised the need for stronger policies, better visibility of women scientists in the media, and dismantling some of the stereotypes which can hold women and girls back. Now, my colleague Ravani shortly will be sharing with you some of UNESCO's concrete actions in this area, but let me just take a moment to highlight one of UNESCO's, perhaps we consider, most impactful initiatives, and that's the L'Oréal UNESCO for Women in Science programme. So for over 25 years, this programme has supported and recognised female scientists at different stages in their careers. Since its launch in 1998, it's awarded 132 international laureates and more than 4,300 young female scientists. And notably, 7 of these laureates have gone on to win Nobel Prizes. And today, I'm delighted to see among the distinguished speakers we have with us 2 exceptional scientists who are ambassadors for our For Women in Science network. Professor Karisha Abdul Karim, which we're very glad to have with us, and Hiya Ilu, who you'll hear more from later in the subsequent sessions. So these achievements really we need to highlight to see the importance of investing in women's scientific careers and ensuring that they have the resources, the opportunities and recognition that they deserve. However, recognition and awareness on their own are not enough. We need stronger policies, we need greater investment in women-led scientific enterprises and a cultural shift that actively promotes and values women's leadership. And we heard the importance of women's leadership in some of the earlier speakers in STEM. And we must also ensure that gender stereotypes and biases in science are increasingly dismantled, that educational pathways for girls in science are opened, and that young women in science have role models, mentors and networks that empower them and enable them to see themselves as scientists, engineers and innovators of tomorrow. So to conclude, really to say by working together, we can ensure that science benefits from the full diversity of human talent, because a more inclusive scientific community is a more powerful tool for innovation, progress and global impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our 3 speakers. You may now leave the stage. I think we have not only been very warmly welcomed by the partners, the organizing partners, but they've already raised some very key points about leadership, about celebrating achievements, about how women and girls shape a brighter future. I like that one. And importantly, we can't do everything. Where do we target action? And we need to take a systems approach looking at multiple dimensions and the structures that are maintaining inequalities. So with that, I would like to invite up our 2 keynote speakers. You can come to the stage while I introduce you. The first person, as Ezra has mentioned, is Ravani Sigamoni. She is a South African who has spent many years in the UNESCO fold, and she is currently the UNESCO representative to the UN. And she's going to be talking about why is it essential to close the gender gap in science, to set the scene. And secondly, Nadia Musaji. Where's Nadia? Nadia is the co-founder and chief innovation officer of 2 organizations, one called Woman Hub and the other called Women Engineering. And I won't say more about that because she's going to tell you, but she's going to be talking about the contextual factors that influence women's advancement in engineering through reflecting on the initiatives that she has put in place and that she leads. So I would like to invite Ravani, please.
Thank you, Glenda, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in front of you this afternoon. And I'm going to set the scene on why we need to close the gender gap of women in STEM. Oops. Okay. So, food for thought. Women and girls continue to be excluded from participating fully in science. According to a UN study in 14 countries, the probability for female students to graduate with a bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degree in science-related fields are 18, 8, and 2%, respectively. While when we look at the male students, they graduate with twice the percentage in bachelor's degrees, more than twice in master's, and almost 3 times, and exactly 3 times, in PhD degrees. So we have a problem with getting women into STEM. Also, when we look at the global gender gap, according to the World Economic Forum, at the moment we've closed the gap by 68.5%. Which means, the good news is that we've actually closed the gap by a further 0.1% compared to 2023. But this means that in order to get parity between male and females, we need 5 generations of young people. And when we look at STEM specifically, the representation of women across seniority levels in STEM and non-STEM fields, we find that when young people enter these fields, and this was the World Economic Forum again in 2023, in the STEM fields we had only 28.4% of young people, 29.4, whereas women in non-STEM fields made up 56.6% of the workforce. However, at the CEO and higher levels, we find that women were at almost 30% in non-STEM, and then in the STEM fields, we only had around 12% of women in STEM. The sad news is that this was 2023, and in the 2024 study, we find that in the STEM fields of women entering, this decreased to 28%, and then in the higher CEO levels, we only had around 10% of women. So this is not looking very good. However, why do we even need women in STEM if we have men doing this? Well, gender diversity, inclusion, and equity means that we design products and help solve the pressing global problems by involving the other half, 50% of the population, which is women. It also makes economic sense. A lack of women in the technology workforce is an economic loss to society. Doubling the share of women in the tech workforce by 2027 could boost the GDP in Europe by 600 billion euros. So as Ezra talked about the call for action of women in STEM, we also UNESCO did a study of 700 female scientists around the world, and they were asked, what do you think would be different in your field if more women were involved? And they said that we could have better ethical standards and more humanistic science, inspiring role models, improved working conditions, greater creativity and innovation, as well as more inclusive research. They also said that we can have more creativity, which is resilience and creativity in the STEM fields. More inclusion, we can have more collaboration, and also fostering collaboration and inclusion, and more role models by being women in STEM and seeing them in these fields. So when we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, and we know there's 17 of them, if we focus in on Sustainable Goal 5, and we look at the SDGs right now, today where we are, we find that in terms of gender equality around the world, and this is achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls, not many countries around the world have achieved gender parity. But we also find that on the African continent, we have many roadblocks. This is today. But if we look at the trend, so looking into 2030, we see that the world is moving towards a brighter future. We see more countries that are green. South Africa is green, which is getting closer to the SDGs. Namibia has achieved parity in Africa, and there are other countries as well that are moving towards this. So this is definitely a positive sign. When we look at women in STEM, we see that women hold less than 25% of science, engineering, and ICT jobs in 2022. And this was from a policy brief done by UNESCO looking at women in science and technology. We also find that they occupy just over 1 in 5 technology positions in companies. The digital transformation is currently led by men. Women constitute only 26% of employees in data and artificial intelligence, only 15% in engineering, and 12% in cloud computing across the world's leading economies. According to our Director General, Audrey Azoulay, she said that in the G20 countries, the proportion of women working in STEM is plateauing at 22%. This situation undermines our collective ability to innovate and respond to the pressing challenges of our times, such as climate change and digital transformation. This was in the report Changing the Equation, which was produced by UNESCO at the end of the Brazil G20. So when we look at women in STEM around the world and in different countries, this is from the UNESCO Institute of Statistics database. We find that on average, only 35% of STEM graduates in the world are women. When we look at the first column at sub-Saharan Africa, we see that leading the way is Tanzania with more than 50% of women in STEM. And second is South Africa with around 48%. And then the other countries that we get in Africa. Across the world, we find that in the Arab states, there's a much better distribution with more women, closer to 50%. And then in what's quite surprising is that Samoa has almost 70% of women in STEM. When we look at students in tertiary education, we find that the trend around the world is that we have more women going to universities and thus more women graduating from universities. However, circled in, as you can see, in sub-Saharan Africa, this is not the trend. We have more men going to university and thus more men graduating. And once again, we find that in terms of STEM, we have very few women going into STEM around the world. Sorry. When we look at the participation of women in research in STEM, as Ezra mentioned as well, we have only 1 in 3 women who are researchers. Women hold less than 25% of science, engineering, and ICT jobs. A mere 17% of inventors in international patents were women. And women are 2 times less likely than men to know how to write a computer program. So last year, the UNESCO office, the Regional Office for Southern Africa, did a study on women in higher education in STEM for 9 countries in Southern Africa, including South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Eswatini, Lesotho, Malawi, and Mozambique. And what we found was, when we broke that up, so we had 33 institutions in those 9 countries who participated. We found that in those countries, in terms of science, we have found parity for women. But when we look at technology, and especially at engineering, we have very few women, less than 30% of women in those fields. When we look at the enrollment at universities, again, we have a high percentage of women at universities. So this means that Southern Africa follows the global trend of women at universities. However, in STEM, once again, we have less than 40% of young women in STEM careers. So, what we find is that we also have gaps in the doctoral studies. For Africa, we need 100,000 PhDs in order to meet the Sustainable Development Goals and the labor market demands in Africa. And this is a tall order, but these PhDs are mainly in science, technology, as well as agriculture and STEM. So where do we go from here? So the survey that I told you about with the 700 scientists that UNESCO did earlier, when the women were asked, how has being a woman in your field inspired you to innovate or approach, they came up with redefining leadership norms, holistic and inclusive visions, balancing work and life, greater resilience and creativity, and motivation to drive societal impact. So what can we do? Well, one of the things is join the UNESCO call of action by closing the gender gap in science. And as Ezra told you about the conference that was done on the 11th of February this year, well, we want you as scientists and as people in this room to share your thoughts, to tell us what you think, what will be different if more women were involved in science. And we'd like you to be part of the community of the call of action. So what we need to do, in conclusion, for getting more women and girls in STEM, is to thoroughly review STEM policies to ensure that there is a gender component. 68% of countries with STEM policies, only half of them support women and girls in STEM. We need to empower young women with knowledge and information about STEM so that they can make informed decisions in their chosen paths of studies. We need to develop tools for data collection in STEM, especially disaggregated data. We need women mentors and programs to encourage young women to take up STEM. We need recruitment and promotion target systems for women in STEM in countries all over the world. STEM conferences like the UNESCO African Union First Continental STEM Conference, which was held in Addis in 2024, brought together policy makers, women scientists, and innovators. We need more of these. We need exclusive research funds for women in STEM. We need institutional and childcare support in terms of mentoring, childcare facilities that can be provided. And we need retention monitoring systems to ensure that targets are met and that we have these policies such as the UN Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 2063 of the AU, and these are policies that we should use in order to get more women into STEM. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ravani, for setting out so concisely and succinctly the state of play and for guiding us to the call for action. I'm very pleased now to invite you up, Nadia. She's going to talk about some very practice and action-oriented interventions. So let's have a Nadia.
Thank you so much to everybody for having me here this afternoon, to UNESCO and HSRC, and Glenda for a wonderful introduction. For me, it gives a great pleasure. I'm an engineer, I'm an entrepreneur. That means that I'm somebody who really is very much solutions focused in terms of meeting the challenges head on. Some of the stats that Ravani so eloquently presented for us this afternoon. Because to be honest, yes, being a woman in STEM is tough. There's not enough of us out there. And I have spent almost the last 2 decades thinking and building on our big, audacious mission, which is to develop a diverse and inclusive STEM ecosystem. So what does that mean in English? For us, STEM, we define it as science, technology, engineering, mining, and manufacturing. And the reason being is that we work in some of the hardest industries that has some of the greatest economic opportunities on the continent and around the world. And so how is it that we're able to ensure that we not just have the talent, but also how do we create the ownership of these industries? So when we talk about women in leadership within the STEM fields, we want to transition that conversation even to the how do we get more women to own STEM industries? Because when you have ownership, you have true transformation. So as I said, I'm an ecosystem builder. You'll hear me also talk about building STEM talent pipelines. And over the last 2 decades, I've really thought about how do we practically do this? Because we've heard the numbers, we've seen them, it's not getting great at a fast rate. How do we accelerate it? To be honest, the World Economic Forum usually says that I will be 167 before there's gender parity in my country. And guys, I can't wait that long. So my back won't be able to manage that. So we've got to do it now, right? And I always think about the African proverb that, and it's also a Chinese proverb, so wherever it comes from, you know, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the second best time was yesterday, and the best time is today, right? So really, how do we start to take some of these learnings and institutionalize it and grow it and accelerate it? And so when we talk about building a talent pipeline, it's really around how do we create awareness right at the beginning and early stages of STEM. Weirdly enough, in 2024, I'm meeting young girls and they still go, oh, you're an engineer, but you're a girl. And I'm just like, how did we not get you positive information and positive role modeling, right? And I sometimes blame the media for this because I'm like, I'd love to see the influence of pop culture on how do we get young women to become really great engineers. So if you ever watched Wakanda, yeah, Shuri is amazing because she's a cool engineer and then she becomes Black Panther, right? But she creates technology and she creates amazing things, and having a female role model is absolutely pivotal for young girls to be able to actually go and go, STEM is for me. And so we start to work at a very young age with girls, and we will take them through every stage of their life, at a high school, at a university, as women in industry, as women innovators, creating the space both physically as well as virtually for them, and then finally onto ownership. And so what does that look like in practice? Because, you know, Nadia, that sounds really nice, building talent pipelines in STEM. Very practically, it's a very much a programmatic approach that we do on the ground. And we've partnered with lots of organizations, including UNESCO. And one of our biggest programs is the 1 Million Girls in STEM program, to be able to create that awareness for girls around the world that STEM is for everybody. Because you can't be what you can't see. And so we need to be able to visualize and verbalize that STEM is for everybody, and that actually engineering is not that tough. And I always, whenever I speak to young girls about engineering, I go, you know, Nadia's not super smart, and nobody sprinkles some like fairy dust magic when I was born to make me an engineer. Nadia worked hard, and Nadia is lazy. And what are engineers? Engineers are generally lazy people, and so what we try and do is just solve problems quickly and effectively, right? And so that's typically what I do on a daily basis, is figure out how not to work. And then as an entrepreneur, how not to work and still make money. So, you know, and being able to change the conversation fundamentally of what engineers do, instead of, oh, you know, you got to do the maths and science and it's so hard. Actually, let's make it fun and exciting for this generation who are completely connected to the world in very, very different ways, and leverage technology and gather information in very, very different ways. And so we're really proud of our partnership with UNESCO and our 1 Million Girls in STEM program. And then those girls graduate and go into high school, where we run Technovation camps. And we focus on coding, robotics, sustainable engineering, and cybersecurity. And for us, it's really around getting their hands dirty and actually getting to make things. But for me, what was absolutely incredible is when you're younger, and I don't know, this is not just a South African thing, but people always ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right? And we've switched that and gone, what problem do you want to solve in your community? And just by changing the framing, every young girl wants to be a problem solver. And so through these tech camps, they are building water filtration systems. They are helping to build better roads and infrastructure for people with disabilities in their communities. They are thinking about supply chains to get healthier food into their communities, right? Absolutely incredible for 18-year-olds to think about all of these things and be connected into this world, which leads us into future skills, because as the world changes so rapidly, we cannot leave anybody behind in a tech-enabled future. I had the privilege this past week, I was in Kenya, and I was speaking to one of the guys at one of the top AI think tanks. And he said to me, Nadia, I read this, we published this paper a really long time ago. And I was like, how long ago? And he's like, a year. So in the AI industry, a year is a very long time ago. And so how do we skill up young people in a world that is changing so fast? And really, we're focusing on artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, coding, data science. There's a whole bunch of new careers that are coming out to be able to change the way in which we work, in which we play, and how we actually behave as human beings. And how are we making sure that young girls are ready for those types of careers? And so once you have that like early stage talent, it's around how do we start to set them up for the next phases of their careers, right? And so we do 3 different programs here. One is an innovation lab. We run hackathons, which is really just how do you actually solve problems in your community, leveraging your engineering background. And for us, it's around how do we start to think about venture building and entrepreneurship. Because to be honest, not everybody should become an entrepreneur. The stuff is really hard. Some people should go into businesses that are existing and grow them. They should go into SMMEs and grow the economies. And so it's about how do we start to support young people, giving them this transition skills for the new world of work. And so we focus on the innovation labs and the hackathons, but we also have been running the Women's Fellows Program, which is going to be 20 years next year of supporting female engineering talent around employability and entrepreneurship skills. And I stand here today to tell you that some of these female engineers are now running production plants for some of the largest companies around the world. They are running their own businesses. They are running institutions and organizations. They are building products and services that meet the needs of people around the world. And for me, that's inspiring and exciting to be able to see how we can actually leverage young people at a very early stage to create and be the change they want to see in the world. We also work at a TVET level, so that's the technical vocation and training level in South Africa. And we work in some of the most impoverished communities to be able to help really lift up young people around economic development. And so when you start to build the talent, you start to actually help them think about becoming problem solvers, creating new products and services in the market. You start to actually get the entrepreneurial ventures. And for me, this is really exciting because this talks about ownership. We work in some of the hardest industries, creating entrepreneurs in the mining sector. So we've got a Women in Mining program where we work with female entrepreneurs to be able to go and service. And these women are absolutely phenomenal. They open cast mining companies. They run component manufacturing companies, they run fabrication plants, right? And so when people go, oh, no, Nadia, we're going to find women, and they're usually just in the entrepreneurial ventures that are traditionally female only. I'm like, no, we're seeing women who are doing absolutely incredible within our programs. And we're helping to incubate those businesses and accelerate them to growth to create the jobs that we need. Because on the continent, last year, 12 million young people went into the job market and only 4 million jobs were created. So you don't need to be an engineer to know that maths is not going to math very, very, very quickly, right? And so how do we start to sustain our economic growth and development? So we run a Women in Engineering incubator, a Woman in Mining, a Woman in Tech, a Woman in Sustainability, a Woman in the Circular Economy, and looking at all different areas around how do we accelerate growth with these women entrepreneurs that are in very deeply technical businesses. And we also do this for organizations and helping them think through what does organizational capacity building look like, and how do we actually become more entrepreneurial in our ventures. But to be honest, none of this matters if we can't move capital into the hands of women entrepreneurs, because this takes money. And so we are providing financial support to the entrepreneurs that are on our programs. And and I'll double down a little bit on the finances in a bit, but when I talk about it takes an ecosystem to raise organizations, and it has the ripple effects, because when we get this right and we put up, and I've taken kind of 3 entrepreneurs that have been part of our network, Delisa, she's a GIS specialist, and they use drone technology to fly over mining areas as well as farming areas. She's got an agri-tech solution as well as a mining solution, and they reduce the cost and the safety hazards on sites to be able to get the data that is needed to do better production, better mining operations, safer mining operations. Chofelo, she actually runs a company called South Africa, and they make juices and now she's building a better manufacturing process, leveraging artificial intelligence and technology to reduce the costs. And then Shanaz, who I lovingly told her, Shanaz, your slogan should be, if it floats, you'll fix it. And she fixes these massive mining vessels that are on South African and Namibian coasts. For some of the largest diamond mining companies in the world. So marine engineering, heavy manufacturing, drone technology, these women entrepreneurs are doing incredible things. But we need to be able to create the space both physically as well as the emotional, psychological, and every other space available. So what the things we've been doing is physically building spaces for female entrepreneurs, and we've got 3 in South Africa, in Cape Town, Johannesburg, and East London. And what is special about our spaces is that our female-focused spaces. So they've got the latest technology in our spaces. We partnered with Cisco, so we've got secure fintech labs, we've got full-stack observability labs, we've got VR labs. So if entrepreneurs are building, they can come to our space and actually build in the space. We're democratizing access to very deep, very expensive technology for ordinary entrepreneurs. But it's not just about being an entrepreneur. Ravani mentioned some of the challenges that women are facing in the industry, and that is access to childcare, right? And so what we did was we built what we call the Junior Engineer Hub, which is a co-play space for kids. So in my office, I've got the latest technology, but I've also got a hub where my kids are usually during the day. And the stuff in the hub is all STEM focused. So there's 3D doodling pens for them to go and draw and design. There's building blocks and Lego. There's a climbing wall. There's also a PlayStation 5 with VR glasses, right? So we really cover all STEM for the kids. And sometimes I actually find some of our male visitors meandering down to play PlayStation 5 in VR, right? They say it's research. But what we want to do for young people is we don't just want them to be gamers. We want them to be able to design better games that are contextual for the African context, for the African market. And so even in our Technovation camps, we're exposing girls to VR. For me, one of the most exciting things is to see a girl put on glasses and her mind completely blown because she is now in Paris running a race. And so we're able to take young people out of their environments into a virtual world to be able to play, connect, and learn in different ways. And so besides the Junior Engineer Hub, we also have lactation rooms, menopause rooms. We actually are looking at renovating one of our hubs and actually putting in a rage room, because honestly, being a female in STEM is so hard. We just want to get angry, but we can't because we've got to always keep it together. So rage room may be the way in which we get all our frustration out. But it's really around thinking about what is it that women need. And when we get it right for women, we get it right for the men too. Because while you may not need the lactation lounge, the space is so conducive that I started to see young guys also bring their kids into the Junior Engineer Hub, right? We're starting to see a whole range of ways in which we're able to kind of bring and create inclusive spaces for everybody. And so the last piece, and I said, none of this matters if we can't move capital into the right hands, whether it's funding young people to go and study engineering and technology and STEM fields, whether it's being able to support talent into these industries. But more importantly, it's really around how do we support entrepreneurs, specifically women entrepreneurs in STEM. Over the last few years, the average amount of capital going into the African continent, specifically funding female founders, is 2% of venture capital dollars. You can't create the next Metas, the next open AIs, without massive amounts of funding. The challenge that female entrepreneurs are facing is a reality every day, and so we decided to raise a venture capital fund, a $30 million fund that invests in female founders in tech across the African continent. We've already done 16 deals in 8 countries. We've also done concessional grant funding to female entrepreneurs to be able to cultivate the ecosystem, and we're now looking at flexible financing for female entrepreneurs, specifically in the climate economy. All our efforts together make us probably the largest contributor and most active investor in female entrepreneurs on the African continent. The reality is we've moved under $4 million. It's embarrassing. We can't have a STEM ecosystem if we don't have the money to go with it, right? And so while we are proudly South African, and we've got a global footprint around the work that we're doing, and we've impacted 150,000 women and girls. We've seen 2,000 young women who have gone through our engineering programs, and we've supported 400 female founders who've gone on to raise about $6.5 million in capital and created 1,500 jobs. I am embarrassed by these numbers. They are too low. Because if we want to really accelerate change in STEM, they always say, and there's this African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. I really want to go further, faster together. And so today I ask everybody to join us to be able to actually make a difference on the ground so that in the next 10 years, I'm not here and I can get gender parity before I'm 167 and I can actually retire by the time I'm 45.
Wow, wow, wow. I think we need to give that another round of applause. We asked for actionable strategies, and there we have them. At this point, I have a couple of minutes to take any comments from the floor. If you want to add any actionable strategies or questions, we can take 2 or 3. Yes, thank you. Talk loudly, please. Oh, we're bringing you a mic.
Thank you. Given that many women seek stability and guaranteed career prospect, how can UNESCO address the challenges that in STEM field, it often takes decades, sometimes 30 years of education and research just to secure an entry-level job with minimal financial security, even with a master's degree? What policies or initiatives can be implemented to make scientific careers more accessible and financially sustainable for women?
Thank you. I'm going to take these questions and comments as agenda setting and as food for filling out. There's somebody at the back there. Oh, do you want to take the front one first while you're here? Oh, we're giving the crew member a workout today.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to find out if there are any retention strategies in place for women in science. So you'd find that a young girl would start a undergraduate degree, do maybe an honors, a master's. By master's level, it starts becoming a little bit more difficult to retain them in academia, to stay, to do a PhD or to do a master's. I myself have taken a very long time to do a PhD because, like you said, it's a balance of life and women have to balance things. So it's life, it's community. So how do I, as an academic, convince my female students to stay in academia? What are the incentives, what are the retention strategies that are in place for women to stay in science, longer so that we can improve those statistics of 2% of women with PhDs. I think that's shocking.
Thank you. Vital point. Vital question. I'll take one more. Yes, go ahead.
I would like to extend my warm greetings to all honorable leaders, distinguished delegates. It is both a privilege and honor to join you today at this esteemed gathering of the G20. I am Karabo Msibudingwane. I am currently completing my Master of Medical Science, specializing in pharmacology. When I was doing my first year master's, I realized that when I was in the journey of applying for employment, I had a lot of depression because I was applying for jobs the whole year and I couldn't get even a single interview. So I came up with an idea that can make me to manage the depression that I had. And it struck me that I can actually be a problem solver because I came up with an idea to start my own businesses. And I remember when I was doing my first year, my first degree, when I was completing my first degree, there was a speaker at my graduation, my first degree graduation, and one of the keynote speakers spoke about actually he is excited because he's graduating future employers. And I was really concerned, or I was really shocked that future employers, I don't understand when he says future employers, because all graduates know that when they are actually graduating, they want to be employed by companies.
Correct.
Then it made sense when I was doing my first year master's, because now I saw that he actually makes sense, because we cannot all be employees. Some of us have to be also employers as well. So it gave me an idea that actually I can also become a problem solver. I can actually have a vision to become a future employer one day. So today's event actually made me so interested and excited to actually engage in this kind of discussions, because I'm actually a person that wants to have a business one day. I would like to be a future employer. So these are my these are the challenges that I identified. So it's actually 3 of them. So the first one is women and girls in science lack formal education in entrepreneurship and marketing skills because the science curriculum focus more on research and development and less on commercialization and business skills. The second one is the lack of female role models in science-driven businesses discourage young women and girls from pursuing entrepreneurship. This is because women scientists are underrepresented in corporate leadership, with few serving as CEOs or policymakers in STEM industries. The third one is women scientists face challenges in licensing and selling their innovations, leading to missed commercial opportunities. Women-owned science businesses struggle to scale beyond local markets due to limited access to global trade opportunities. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Karabo, and thank you to our 3 contributors for sharing the challenges and the possible solutions and the possible directions that we need to be putting more attention into. I think you guys have raised a number of those points, and I hope you'll talk to Nadia afterwards to join her entrepreneurship program. And with that, I'm mindful of the time. Let's give you a final hand. Thank you. And now we come to our round table discussion. We had the question, what does it take to shape a better future where women and girls can thrive in STEM careers? Imran has asked us to turn that around to say, where women and girls thrive in STEM careers, how can that shape a better future? Am I correct, Imran? So I'm going to call up Dr. Dorothy Ngila from our National Research Foundation in South Africa. She is a Women 20 South Africa delegate, and she's a chair of the Education, STEM and Digital Divide Working Group. Dorothy, you're very welcome. I'm going to leave it to you to introduce your panel. Panelists, if you can start coming to the stage, please.
Thank you very much. Hi, thank you. I want to start by introducing the panelists today as they come up. Ms. Sylvia Bojinova, representing the Directorate General for Research and Innovation at the EU Commission. Dr. Maputi Madiga, representing South Africa's Department of Science, Technology and Innovation. Dr. Cobus van Breda, representing the University of the Free State in South Africa. Professor Karesha Abdul Karim, representing both Columbia University and the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. Dr. Kiamo Ketse More, representing the University of Venda. Professor Anthea Roda, representing the University of the Free State. And Ms. Hilia Helu, L'Oreal UNESCO Women in Science Award winner, based at the University of Cape Town. I'm really delighted today that our roundtable panel is going to feature insights that cover many different approaches. What we've heard until now is that doing research and innovation the right way has the potential to save lives and to save money, create money too. Over the last decades, and really inspired by the work of the Gendered Innovation Project, there have been a number of strategic approaches, 3 that institutions of science have used to advance gender equality and inclusion. There has been a focus on fixing the numbers. We've heard a lot about why it's important to fix the numbers, focusing on women's participation and increasing the numbers of underrepresented groups' participation in science. We have focused on fixing the institutions, which promotes structural changes at institutions of science. We have also focused, thirdly, on fixing the knowledge, which is my current preoccupation, or what we call gendered innovation, which centers around stimulating scientific excellence by integrating sex, gender, and intersectional analysis into research. What does it take to shape a better future where women and girls can thrive in STEM careers? Those 3 approaches, I believe, are really critical to think of, and this panel is inclusive of colleagues that have been working across these different approaches. The question that we are posing today is intentional. It is considered, and it is informed by the recent, and especially in the post-COVID pushbacks of conversations and actions regarding gender equality and inclusion more broadly, but also globally. I want to start with you, Ms. Bojinova. Please could you provide some insights, especially at least 2 of them, of key initiatives established by the EU to promote gender equality and inclusion in science? Thank you. Please, may I request for mics? We're going to sit here and we're going to try to have a real roundtable conversation as part of our panel.
Yes, thank you so much. It's my great honor and pleasure to represent the European Commission in this event. Thank you so much for the organizers. For the European Union to work on empowering women and girls is a very important issue. And this comes from the problem that the gender gap is a serious issue for us as society, for our economy. And it is not only a question to empower women and girls, but it's actually a question how to make sure that they have equal access to the same opportunities. What exactly the European Union is doing? First, on the policy area, we have created already for more than 10 years our European research area, the European education area, and for 2 years the European innovation area. In the European research area, we have started a number of policy initiatives, and one of them is exactly on the issue how to close the gender gap. Because also on our side, in the European Union, we have very worrying statistics, and these statistics show that even only 48% of women graduate in the STEM area, then only 19% of them will be able to obtain an at-present and professional position. So obviously, there is a serious gap, or we call it the Likely pipeline effect. So for this reason, we have adopted a special action where all our EU member states and also countries which are associated to Horizon Europe, our current 9th framework program for funding of research and innovation. This action is has the area, the task exactly to promote gender equality and inclusiveness in European research and innovation. And we have produced, only in the course of the last 2 years, four very important deliverables. First, we have developed a policy coordination mechanism for gender equality plans and policies. We have created a strategy to counteract gender-based violence and to ensure gender equality in a working environment. We have produced a strategy to strengthen gender equality through gender mainstreaming and also a strategy to integrate and evaluate the gender perspective. But in more practical terms, with already the previous work program, we have introduced an obligation, and this is now obligation in our Horizon Europe program, that each organization, research organization, public body who would like to apply for funding in Horizon Europe has to have the so-called gender equality plan. What is the gender equality plan? Because for us, we have seen that this plan has brought a lot of changes in organizations applying for funding in our program. The gender equality plan is a set of actions for organizations that aim to promote gender equality through institutional and cultural changes in research and innovation for this organization. And this means that the organization has to explain in this plan and then to implement, of course, concrete measures and targets on work-life balance and organizational culture, on gender balance and leadership and decision-making, on gender equality in recruitment and career progression. Since 2022, this is a criteria which means that if education wants to be funded, it has to prove that this plan is adopted and it is implemented. Also we have in the meantime started funding through Horizon Europe of projects which are teaching organizations how to make sure that the gender gap will be closed. Only last year, for example, we have launched a project which will be developing a manifesto on gender-inclusive STEAM education and careers by piloting and fostering the integration of STEAM approaches in STEAM education. And we expect that this will bring further improvement for the work of high schools, academia, public authorities, and industry stakeholders. I'll stop here and hope to be able to participate later in the discussions. Thank you so much, Dorothy.
Thank you very much for that. It's really important for us to understand the ways in which we fix institutions, and what you've just outlined are really clear policy directions that you have taken so that we can enable those structural changes that we are looking for. I would like to come to you, Dr. Madiga. Very similar question, and what I want you to focus on is also the two key learnings from implementing the programs that you've been implementing in the South African government perspective. I'm going to ask all the colleagues, there is so many of us, I want to make sure that all of us who have taken the time to really commit and prepare for this have the chance. And so if we could be brief, if we could focus on action, two at the most of the initiatives, I would really appreciate that. Thank you. Dr. Matika.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Maputi, and I'm a representative from the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation. And from our side, we are guided by the 2019 white paper on science, technology and innovation, which really emphasizes the importance of inclusivity, transformation and partnerships to address the development of human capabilities. And we do recognize that gender disparity remains a significant challenge in the fields of STEM globally. However, if you look at the 2023 NACI report on facts, facing the facts, you will see that we have made significant milestone in gender representation in South Africa higher education sector, where women now constitute 51% of teaching and workforce at universities, and actually 45% of researchers in South Africa. So you can see that there is progress in South Africa in terms of gender equity. Some of these initiatives that we have are actually run by the South African Agency for Science and Technology Advancement, which is at grassroots level, where they run science outreach programs that are targeting girls at schools, which in promoting STEM careers through their workshops, competitions, role modeling, and they also host the National Science Week each year so that women can highlight their contribution to science. There's also the African Girls Can Code initiative. I'm really excited by Nadia's work that she's doing. It's really amazing, where this initiative trains young girls in coding, robotics, and digital skills. So I already see partnerships here with Nadia's work. We also have the Techno Girl, where in partnership with UNICEF and the Department of Basic Education, where they provide job shadowing opportunities for girls. We also have a various of initiatives where we support postgraduate students for their studies, providing them with bursaries, and we also have research grants that we allocate for women. And on these programs, there are clear equity targets that are set to increase women representation. In our awarding, we award 55% of our grants and bursaries to women. And we also have centers of excellence. We also have SACHI, where there are strategic interventions that are focusing on high impact research. And really, we need more work on these high level ones because there is less representation of women on these ones. I also want to just highlight our exciting awards that we have just to recognize women in STEM. We have the South African Women in Science Awards, which recognize and celebrate outstanding female scientists, and one of them is here, Prof. Abdul. So where we recognize 26 women in South Africa, and we profile them as role models for young girls and encourage them to participate in STEM careers. And we're actually this year launching a book on the SAWISA alumni. This will assist in some of the actions that I've seen in this Closing the Gap Gender, is that we need to showcase and feature the women everywhere else so that young women can be inspired to do STEM careers. In terms of the learnings, I have other ones that we do as a country, but due to time I will not mention them. In terms of the key learnings, what we have learned is that early exposure is crucial. I think programs like African Girls Can Code initiative show that if you introduce the girls to STEM at earlier age, it fosters confidence and interest in this field. And I think the biggest lesson is also that financial support boosts participation. So the provision of scholarships, research grants, and actually dedicated funding for women in STEM have really increased participation of women in this. And lastly, I think this was mentioned, is that, in us addressing this issue of systemic barriers, we need to ensure that our policy go beyond education and actually include workplace transformation and leadership development. I will stop here. Thanks, Dorothy.
Thank you very much, Dr. Madiga, and really for also reminding us that this conversation that we are having, it takes a focus on human capital development pipeline. It's not just about one target area, it's across the whole pipeline, which confirms and really speaks also to the messages that came before us. I'm going to go now to Ms. Ilu and Professor Karim. We've heard the policy space, and I want to hear more about your experiences as women in science. I'm going to start with you, Prof. Karim. You are a celebrated, established, and award-winning female scientist, and we want to find out from you, as we focus on celebrating and thinking about role modeling, what would you say are 2 key moments that shaped your career?
Dorothy, thank you very much. So let me start by thanking the organizers for the opportunity to be part of this distinguished panel, and the previous speakers for actually laying out the landscape so well, for the luxury we can no longer afford with the complex challenges facing us. We certainly can't afford to lose half the world, or not include half the world in that, 1. And 2 is also the asymmetries that we need to recognize in knowledge generation geospatially. And here I'm talking about the global south. So to think about 2 moments, I think, is quite something. But let me just make the first point, which is, you know, when I sit here or in meetings and gatherings like this, it is like many of us around the table and in the room against many odds. I was born 65 years ago in a small village north of Durban, and the fact that I got an opportunity to go to school was from the commitment in the community. And here were laborers from the sugarcane plantations who earned meager amounts of money and who committed to putting that money, £1 a month, together with some merchants to bring out teachers, set up the schools. And I had, from grade 1, amazing, committed, dedicated teachers who nurtured my curiosity, a supportive family. And then as I moved on and decided to study science, I had great mentors who taught me the importance of activism that goes hand in hand with scientific excellence. And so growing up in apartheid South Africa really shaped 2 things in me around the importance of science and the hope science brings. And 2 is the importance of social justice in what we do. And so it's not a surprise that I chose to be an infectious diseases epidemiologist. My first study that I did in 1989 to try and get a handle of the HIV/AIDS epidemic in South Africa set me on a path that I would think is the other momentous moment. What the data showed was that women had 4 times more infection than men, and 2, that women were acquiring HIV about 5 to 7 years earlier than men. This age-sex disparate relationship and the fact that young women between the ages of 15 to 24 were bearing a disproportionate burden of infection was counter to where the world was focused at that time in terms of HIV. It was mainly in industrialized countries, focused on men who have sex with men and injecting drug users. The picture in Africa was very different. And me doing an age-sex disaggregated analysis, and I have to acknowledge my husband, who has traveled this journey in terms of our HIV research over 37 years. And I think we're a good example of professional supportive partnerships and personal supportive partnerships coming together very synergistically. So that led us to, and I should say, when we published that paper in a very esteemed journal, there were many of our peers outside South Africa and Africa who actually questioned that. And it took us like another 10 years when more sophisticated technology became available to show definitively why young women were getting infected. So I'm going to get there a little bit faster, Dorothy. The other point I wanted to make was about 21 years ago, establishing CAPRISA. So one was the burden of infection. Two was a gap that we had, a prevention gap. So we knew women were bearing a disproportionate burden of infection, but everybody was focused on abstinence, behavior change, and male condom use. And so we were very bold in 1993 to say we are going to try and develop a technology that women can use. Now, fully recognizing what underpins that was gender power disparities. Those take longer to fix, but can a biotechnology enable women to reach age 25, HIV-free, and live a full life and reach their full potential? Now, if time allows, I can talk about CAPRISA, because I think the Center for the AIDS Program of Research also epitomizes a new model, which is how we brought 5 institutions together that is synergistic. And in dealing with complex challenges, we do need to have cooperation nationally, cooperation globally, and relationships that are built on mutual trust and respect, because the knowledge we need to generate has to be beyond multi-sectoral responses to science that transcends to tackle head-on these complex challenges that threaten sustainable development. And CAPRISA represents that nationally, how we brought these 5 institutions together, how they've worked together to make many breakthroughs that put South African science on the map. It's undergirded by 3 fundamental values that of excellence, innovation, and service to humanity. And I'm happy during Q&A to expand. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you for being so action-orientated to take on these policy strategies that have just been shared, thinking about human capital development pipeline and telling us your story from how that focus on the pipeline really gets you to where you are now. And for me, I think what stands out is your focus on combining advocacy, this question of social justice, with STEM, which is so critical in our field and even in closing the gap, right? Advocacy and action have to go hand in hand in our scientific enterprise. I'm going to come to you now, Ms. Ilu. You are on the other side of the human capital development pipeline as a young person who is pursuing their postgraduate studies and really interested in getting into this workforce. And I want you to share a little bit of your story, number 1, and number 2, to talk to us about what you think are 2 key challenges that young people are engaging with in STEM fields that you want all of us to remember and to fix in our policies, in the way that we mentor, in the way that we champion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. As mentioned, I am a PhD student at the University of Cape Town, and my work is currently in malaria modeling, so also an aspiring infectious disease epidemiologist. And I think my journey in science was kickstarted by my mom. My mom is a nurse, and as such, she took me with to work growing up, and I got to see the insides of the hospital. And initially, I thought, okay, I guess the quote-unquote best thing to be here is a doctor. And then I thought, they don't seem to have sufficient work-life balance. So then I considered other avenues, and that's sort of how I stumbled across science as a tool to sort of support the health sciences. And I think in that, I think there's one thing around girls in school growing up, figuring out that STEM careers are very much a practical and reasonable career choice. But then I think outside of that, there's also battling community perception and perceptions within your own family that, you know, even on social media a few weeks ago, there was this tweet about how BSc is an academic degree, not a professional degree, and that, you know, where you're gonna go if you study a BSc. And I think perceptions like that, public perceptions like that, really discourage women and girls in their choices to pursue STEM careers. And I think that, a large thing then is around creating industry, obviously, where these people can where these women can work going forward, and supporting those that do want to be STEM entrepreneurs specifically. But I think outside of the work that is being done in schools with the science centers and the girls programs, I think there needs to be community programs, family programs, because that's where the discussion happens around what career you're actually going to pursue, right? The second thing I think is, I guess, a thing that I feel has affected me then going forward in my career around postgraduate funding, like was raised policy-wise. But then also I think one of the things I really value about the L'Oreal UNESCO grant is that in it, they make provision for the fact that some of these grant funds may go towards, maternity leave or child rearing services. And I think those are important considerations for anyone or any young woman deciding to pursue a career in science for the long term, because, I don't have the numbers on the average age of a PhD, but I would say it's around about the time that a lot of people are also thinking about, bearing children and expanding their families in that sense. And if the scholarship or the fund or the grant is not making provisions for that, I think it leaves you in a sort of, okay, then I have to choose either a career in STEM or a personal family life, or the choice to be a mother. And I don't think we should be putting young women or women in general in that position. Maybe a last thing on policy-wise, I do think that young women professionally and maybe a bit around how STEM careers can be quite aggressive and difficult. I think that a challenge would be, policy exists around protecting women against harassment, sexual harassment, non-sexual harassment, but I think an additional challenge is around the implementation of that policy to say, I'd want people to look sort of from the POV of the woman, the point of view of the woman, to say, if a young woman in my organization was to report a case today, how would she practically go about it? Who are the people? Is she forced to sort of engage with the perpetrators in reporting this, considering they are likely like her supervisors or her superior head of department, things like that? So I think those sort of pipelines as well around implementation of safety for women in their professional careers also should be strengthened. Thank you.
Thank you very much for raising some really important comments. And I know that we're going to talk a little bit more about GBVF, which is such an important part for us to take apart today. I am grateful that you raised the question around these social-cultural barriers. When we talk generally around what is the participation of women and girls in science, we have this broad terminology that we say there are social-cultural barriers. But we don't actually take the chance to go deeper and ask ourselves the questions, what are they? How are we helping women, girls, families navigate what needs to change? And what is the responsibility of those of us who are in the external environment to put in place policies, to put in place the strategies to support that? How do we get more women scientists to talk about what does it look like for me as I grow in my career to make the right choices and partners, to start my families in the way that it makes sense for me, because it sets our children up for success when we have those conversations in a more externally facing way, not just in the family context. Thank you very much for that. Professor Roda, we've had
the experience of two women scientists. You are coming to us from a university context. The question that we want to pose to you is, what do you consider as some key roles for universities in closing the gender gap in STEM, and especially thinking about some of the poignant issues that have been coming out from Professor Karim and also from Ms. Ilu? Thank you.
Thank you, and as the other speakers have said, it's really an honor and a pleasure to be here to share some thoughts. So I think it's important to start off by saying that universities should be spaces that embrace and actively promote basic principles of equality and diversity. And then universities are generally seen as incubators of new knowledge and innovation. But we also have a very definite society-focused role, whereby we need to shape and develop not only our good workers for the job, but also citizens, good citizens, who will then make an impact. And so through that, just a number of points in terms of the roles of universities and what universities, have done, just by one or two examples, is around a couple of things, and one of the things is specifically around creating the space and creating the environment for, let's say, women and females to be able to thrive within the space, for example, of academia. And we do this through our programs. There's a lot of national programs. And examples are our programs related to these the higher education leadership management programs, specifically for women in leadership. And through these women in leadership programs, we make leadership in academia. We make opportunities then available. Also, we meet other women academics, and we have these conversations. I think we often have the presentations, but it's always the unintended conversations that happen when we attend these programs, and where we learn from each other, how we support each other through these communities of practice. And then obviously, also through the HERS is a number of academic leaders, women leaders and scientists have gone through these programs and are thriving and are working not only in the university space but other spaces as well. And so just in terms of at the University of the Free State, we've also looked at a number of programs. We have our working group on gender parity in academic leadership, and it's specifically then looking at, so what are some of the challenges that women in the academia are experiencing, and how could this be addressed? We also have a WISE program specifically for women in academia, so it's about creating the environment for women in academia to be able to then thrive. So I think what's important is creating the environment, creating the support. We've spoken a lot about it, and I think that is quite important, to be intentional around mentoring and coaching. Specifically the aspect of peer mentoring and coaching, because it is through those peer mentorships and coaching exercise or engagements that we kind of learn from each other, that we learn around what are some of the tips that I can use while I'm in an institution, especially around the emerging kind of, we call it the emerging scholars. We get into these spaces and there's so many opportunities, but also so many challenges. And how do I journey through some of that? And it's through these peer mentoring opportunities. Linked to that again is also the idea of paying it forward. So as I've journeyed through some of these processes, how do I then look back and engage, take the hands of the other women academics or women scholars, women scientists, to be able to facilitate success. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rhoda, for talking about space. Space is something that is so important for women in academia, for girls who are interested in STEM, and thinking about the university as a space for dialogue, as a space for holding these conversations, as a space where mentorship and coaching can take place. We are now going to shift gears to really focus and center our conversation around an issue that is so critical for supporting and closing the gap when it comes to women and girls in STEM. Dr. More, based on your recent research at the OECD, you have been focusing on gender-based violence. You know that it exacerbates inequalities for women and girls in science. You've talked about it, Ms. Ilu. And I wondered whether you could share a little bit about what are the ways that it does exacerbate these inequalities, and also to give us at least 2 strategies that can be used to support women in STEM who find themselves experiencing gender-based violence in the context of the scientific enterprise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. And it's a pleasure to be here, but I am presenting a very heavy topic. A topic that we can never run away from because it's our reality as women. If I may ask, who of us has been sexually harassed? I'm one of those people. And if we can raise up our hands, we'll find that majority of women are sexually harassed. And this happens within all our spaces. So gender-based violence is a social justice issue. We can never run away from that. Because where there's gender-based violence, it means that women, young girls, are not going to be able to thrive. And within the space of universities, within STEM, because STEM happens for it to be anchored, it starts from the home. We heard from Professor Karam. It starts from the home. However, if now the family system or other system, basically the university, stereotypes women. I mean, the ideal, we heard Nadia saying that, but you are a female. Those stereotypes, the ideal scientist to date is still a man, not a woman. And because of the challenges, one of Hilda mentioned some of the challenges that I experienced in STEM. Those challenges, such as, for instance, in higher education or in STEM, there are intellectual sabotage, where women are being undermined for their contributions, or whatever they produced is being stolen, pressurized, or their ideas are just dismissed, or they're even excluded from networks. That makes it hard for them to thrive and to thrive. And what happens? They either have to fight, accept what is happening at the expense of their own well-being, or leave the profession. And when they leave the profession, it becomes a cyclical process where basically the ideas that are, the stereotypes that are perpetuated against women in STEM become anchored. So it's actually a hard space and issue to deal with. And also when we consider professors, female professors, there's a study that said female professors consider themselves as basically nurturing, and however, personality-wise. However, when it comes to being, that person who has to achieve career-wise, they are as agentic as males. So it means that we compromise who we ought to be. We compromise how we can take others with us in order for us to actually become leaders in our fields. And also, I can now share the various strategies that we can use. We mentioned that there are always, sexual harassment policies. But when I report, it will be known that it is Kiamagetse who reported. So there needs to be an element of anonymity. And that has to be respected. And those who are reporting, the victims, need to be made aware of confidentiality and anonymity. And I bet that anonymity is the best. But also, organizations, universities need to take stock of themselves. It is actually a bit unfair to be always expecting the people who are being victimized to actually tell how to solve this. They do not have the power to actually change the system. The system itself needs to look at itself as to what it is that we are doing to actually perpetuate this stereotypes or the lack of females and women not progressing. People in power need to actually take stock. And how do they take stock? By actually using data. There's lots of data that is generated at universities. Where are the women? What is preventing these women? Who are these women who are here? And what are we doing? Because if we are always saying that it ought to be women who actually do something, we are not changing the system. We are not changing the environment. So we need to take not a micro approach, but a macro approach, which is systematic to actually deal with the issues that are faced. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I think it's so important to take note as one of our conclusions of this, the importance of structural change, organizational change, institutional change, going beyond a policy and really holding each other accountable in our different institutions around the question of how do we protect women and girls who are experiencing harassment, who are experiencing bullying, who are experiencing gender-based violence. It is not the burden on the women and girls, it's the burden on the institution. And there's a key aspect here around fixing our institutions in that sense. Dr. Van Breda, we come to you. There is absolutely a role for men in science, a role for families in science, in addressing the gender gap in STEM. However, when we have these kinds of conversations, that role is often unclear. It is unclear, it is unsaid, it is unwritten. And we want to ask you to share with us some ways, some practical measures and insights in the ways that men, and especially in the family context as well, can contribute to shaping a future where everyone in STEM can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here, and as you've said, I think the context of what I will present will be a little bit different from the rest of the panel, so bear with me. It's not an easy question to answer, so probably it's more setting a scene for discussion. Just to give a little bit of background, I'm from a unit called Science for the Future. It's a self-funding extra-academic unit or entity at the Faculty of Education of the University of the Free State, and the mission of the unit is the advancement of innovative and effective maths and science teaching and learning, beneficial to student teachers, in-service teachers, learners, parents, and the public at large. Our focus is math and science teacher professional development, as well as community engagement initiatives regarding science communication. Now, to provide a little bit of a framework for discussing the role of families, men and boys, in addressing this gender gap in STEM, although we also talk about STEAM plus, I'm going to do it from the perspective of, I think, one initiative. There's another initiative. Hopefully I get an opportunity later to elaborate on that. But let me go to the family math program because it directly addresses some of the issues. Now, somebody earlier said that girls and women in STEM, it's not in isolation. It goes with previously disadvantaged communities, rural education, etc., etc. It goes on and goes on. So what we are trying to address is challenges that prevent learners, especially in the rural areas of South Africa, and if I say learners, it automatically includes girls, because 50% of the learners in South Africa is basically girls, so they are disadvantaged in the rural areas. So there are definite challenges for them to achieve at school level and in maths and science. So we are at the beginning of the pipeline. Things like teacher subject content knowledge, teaching skills, resources at schools, and then definitely parental involvement is one of the issues that research shown plays a significant role in learners' achievement. It basically says that if a parent, and let me just quickly qualify parent. If we say parent, we think about a mom and a dad. But if you talk about rural South Africa, many times it's a granny, it's a sibling, it's an aunt. So it's not your traditional mom and dad necessarily. It's somebody caring for a child or a learner. So if parents are involved with their children, it's a researched fact that learners will achieve better. I think it sort of makes sense. There's different levels of parent involvement. The ultimate involvement in terms of learner achievement is when parents can be involved in the learning or the content or the subjects of their children. Now, if you just think rural South Africa, a parent or a auntie or a granny, how can they contribute to mathematics of learners? Sometimes you will have a grandmother that probably didn't went to school, that have a language barrier. So how can they be involved in the education of their children? If I'm talking about children, every time I refer to the 50% girls also. So what we've done is, in one of our teacher professional development programs, we call it the Family Math Program, we've included a parent component. So the teacher professional development program is about getting the teacher to the university, train them in effective teaching and learning methodologies like active learning, hands-on learning, content in context, providing them with resources. They go back to the school, implementing it in the classroom. So it's trying to be more efficient in terms of the learners that are equally number of boys and girls, to provide an equal opportunity to them. But then they also have, in this model, have to have parent workshops. So what they do is they like they say, they call the parents for a workshop, the parents of the learners in their class. And they basically every term, after our training session, get the parents together, and they do, let me call it, maybe it's not the correct word, simple activities. What the learners do in the classroom, the teachers do with the parents, that they can do with the learners at home. So it's about support of the parents to the learners. Now, if we think about it, some of the parents are illiterate, some of them have language barriers. So it's a great help if the teacher then can have a parent workshop and show the parents how they can help their learners. And that definitely increased the opportunity for the learner. It also, the teachers, and we are usually working in the foundation phase, 80% of the teachers are women. So it also gives them the opportunity to become community leaders, because they now suddenly become a leader of 30, 40, 50 parents, in showing them how they can help their learners. So I think the moral of the story is just that through this program, we enable parents to also be involved in the learning of their children. I think I'm just going to stop there, just for the sake of time. I can elaborate later on again.
Thank you very much for centering the role of a family and the role of teachers as extended parents to our, not just the children, but also to the parents or the parental figures. It's so important for STEM to make sure that whole families are involved. Colleagues, we have the opportunity now for 1 or 2 questions. It's going to be 2 if the first person makes it brief. Otherwise, we can only take 1. Do I have some questions or comments or additions to the conversation? Right. Okay. It seems like we can finalize our discussion with 2 or 3 questions that I had for you. Professor Karim, you are in a leadership position. You've talked to us about CAPRISA. You have also gone back to the past, thinking about your career in that sense. I was wondering whether you could share a little bit of your insights around science policy, how it can better support women scientists, particularly in Africa and the Global South, and also reflecting, given the conversation that we've been having now, and your role at TWAS. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. So let me just start with CAPRISA, the Center for the AIDS Program of Research in South Africa. We co-founded this in about 21 years ago. And the first point I wanted to make about CAPRISA, which I'm very chuffed about, is that it's 80% women. And it's 80% women, not just in the middle, but from the top all the way. We have only 2 departments that are male-dominated. One is IT, and the other is the team of drivers. The rest of it is 75 or more percentage of women, from leadership to middle management, etc. The other point I wanted to make about CAPRISA is that training is a very integral part of what we do. And with all the research underway, it creates amazing opportunities for honors, masters, doctoral students. And because we have so many women, it's a supportive environment for women. We find many stay on and then take on postdoctoral positions. And I'm so excited to see this new middle layer of postdocs that are emerging, who are raising their own funding and establishing their own wet labs or areas of research focus and so on. So, and then lastly, in our rural community where we have a clinic, it's about 150 kilometers west of Durban, we also have an internship program where local students, and this is the thing about, if you see it, you can dream it, you can believe it, you can realize it, and everything else that everyone's been talking about. And for me, that's been one of the really exciting parts of encouraging high school kids to come in, spend their holidays there, or graduates or students to come in and do internships. And that's really helped them in terms of making them more employable, and some of the amazing placements they had is great. Second thing I want to talk about is TWAS, the World Academy of Sciences. And it was established 40 years ago with the vision of Nobel laureate Abdus Salam about using science for sustainable development. And in its 40 years of existence, I'm its first woman president, and I'm really excited that half the council is made up of women. And I think, oftentimes we hear, and I've also experienced it, where we talk about the other PhD, where you pull her down at every opportunity. So I think when we see that happen at the council level in the World Academy of Sciences, and I think it's the only Academy of Science that has that gender balance, a big part of what we do is recognize excellence through the fellows, and we have 1,500 of them, highlighting and underscoring that science excellence exists in the Global South, and we have 10 subject categories to profile that. The gender balance within each subject category is not always great, but we're working and keep working towards that. And then the other issue is our ongoing investment in training and capacity development, and here very intentionally focusing on making sure we've got gender balance, and that for me, two exciting things out of the TWAST investments in training and capacity development, notwithstanding the critical mass of scientists in countries that are being established, is the partnership with the Organization for Women in Science and Development, which does that investment, saying that, just getting a PhD is not enough. You need that support. And on that, how do they work? And Tonya Blowers and her team have been really excellent in walking women through that journey, setting up those chapters at a country level. And then the other exciting thing for me is the young affiliates. So I felt really chuffed that I was with you here in terms of this whole thing of old, experienced, and young people, and we learned so much. And these young affiliates have really done amazing science, but also are taking a great leadership role. They've created a network, Tian, and some of the things they're doing in pedagogy, in finding solutions on climate change, this whole peer support, it takes science diplomacy another level. And I think finally I want to say that in all of this, it takes an all-of-society approach. And I think often when we think about policy, we think about government, and government has to do X, Y, and Z. But, the policy is a good starting point. It creates the framework for doing things, and it ensures that institutions follow that. But I think strong institutions are important, but that all sectors of society need to be involved. And I think in science, where we're generating knowledge to benefit humanity, we can't wait for the products to be developed before we take it to civil society. I think civil society, from a very early stage, need to be part of that process. And I've heard exciting projects where school kids are involved in data collection. And I'm sure all of us can remember when we were in primary school, how exciting it is to go home and say, well, I did this today, and that's really where that curiosity is nurtured, where the dreams start, and where you can imagine a future where everyone's full potential is realized. So I'm a very strong believer of all of society, rather than just having private sector or government or so-and-so doing things, or scientific institutions. We have to all walk this journey together to realize a future that's sustainable and a legacy for generations to come.
Thank you very much, Professor Karim, for that. How do we close the gender gap in STEM? We think about it from a global perspective, from a regional perspective, we think about it from a national perspective. There is a very clear role for families and men. There is a very clear role of thinking about this from a human capital development perspective. There are some very key issues, and the one that we have really indicated here is around gender-based violence and how important it is to fix institutions. There is a role for universities, and we have to always center the woman, the girl. Those are the people that we want to change for. I hope that this roundtable discussion has demonstrated that there isn't noise, there isn't pushbacks on all things gender equality and inclusion is noise. It's noise that has the catastrophic potential effect to distract us from the 3 strategic approaches that we mentioned before. It distracts us from all the conversation that we have had here and how much further that we need to go. And I would urge all of us to double down on fixing our institutions, fixing the numbers, fixing the knowledge, because doing research the right way has the potential to save lives, it saves money, it is good for our world. I want to thank the panel very much for your highlights, for being so inclusive in the way that you engaged, and I want to hand it back over to Dr. Cruz. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy, for, I'm sure everyone will agree, that was an absolutely brilliantly chaired panel, and thank you again, everyone, for your contributions. I think, Dorothy has summed up so well, there's nothing more for me to say, except to bring it back to our G20 agenda. And although we've drawn a lot and reflected a lot from the South African and African experience today, I think it's clear that what we are doing is setting out a kind of agenda of the different dimensions and aspects that we can be considering. And we spoke earlier about the possibility of sharing stories and best insights and best practices from across countries, and the discussion we've had here gives us a kind of set of dimensions that we should be asking to share those different kinds of stories around. And I think I put the challenge to talk about accelerating action at the beginning, and I think that all of the panelists and speakers have really taken us forward in directing how we can accelerate actions in very, very creative ways and with a great deal of passion. So we also are responsible for writing a report on this, and I think that will give us an opportunity to take forward the work in terms of the G20 agenda on diversity, inclusion, equity, and accessibility. So for now, I would like to call up Mampe Chaba from the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation to give our concluding comments.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cruz, and thank you very much for this opportunity. Let me just start by indicating that our Deputy Minister, Ms. Namalungelo Gina, was supposed to be with us this afternoon. And when we briefed her on Thursday about this session, she was really excited and really wanted to be here. She, like me, she's a black woman, and she is in the highest echelons of leadership, not just in government, but in the country. And it's because of the progressive policies that our government has put forward to support women in leadership. She, like me, I am a black woman from a rural community who matriculated from a high school 30 years ago that had pit toilets, but still managed to achieve 100% pass rate in maths and science. And many more can benefit if we respond to the call of action that is before us. The session has been interesting. I'm not going to try to summarize it, but we heard about women being underrepresented in STEM, in peace, in leadership, and that we need to change the social system. It takes you and I in our personal spaces, in our communities, in our workspaces, and in the systems of the world, such as the G20, to make that change. So I have a homework for you. What are you going to do on Monday when you get back to your offices? And I have 3 suggestions. To the G20 countries, priority 3. We talked a lot about it today. We've achieved 3.4 through this session. We are left with 3.1, 3.2, and 3.5. I'm not going to go into that. Let us make the change that needs to happen to support women and girls in STEAM+. We also have this call of action from UNESCO. Each and every one of us can play a role. And I'd like to add one recommendation in that list of recommendations. Expose your girl children in your workplaces so that they can see you in action and be inspired and motivated. Homework number 3. We engaged with Indigenous knowledge holders this week, this past 2 days. And they talked about each one, teach one. Let us do that to ensure that women and girls in science, in leadership, can shape a brighter future for all of us, as Imran said. With that, I'd like to express gratitude to our partners. The UNESCO, I think we are represented here by Ezra, Galindo, and Rovani. HSRC, represented by the HSRC CEO, Professor Sarah Musweze, and your capable team. To the University of the Free State leadership, some are not here today, but we have Professor Rhonda. Thank you for joining us here, and your team. And to the speakers and the panelists who so bravely tackled a really difficult topic today and provided us with not just what the challenges are, but the solutions that we can take forward. I'd also like to thank you as an engaged audience that was so patient with us after having been seated for so long, and to our young students that have joined us and posed such interesting questions, but also proposed solutions and actions that we can take forward. Last homework, enjoy the braai this afternoon. Thank you. Just before you go, the photographer has asked for all the panelists to please come on stage for a group photo. And as you leave the auditorium, the buses are waiting outside to take you to the Naval Hill Auditorium for the evening function. Speakers, panelists, please come to the stage.
Imagine a symphony. Every voice, every note, building to something big. Imagine, as the music builds, you notice instruments missing. What if entire sections were silenced? When we limit what's possible, we limit how far we can go. Now imagine scientific progress. The hands that shape AI to listen and understand. The minds that unlock the secrets of conquering cancer. The hearts that protect our planet's delicate balance. The visionaries turning sunlight into usable energy. Today, only 1/3 of these voices belong to women. Imagine more. More perspectives. More innovation. More impact. Imagine a world where every question finds its answer, every idea its champion, where no voice is left unheard. Science has no limits, and neither should the people who drive it forward.